From an early age, I understood that if I wanted something done, I had to do it myself. My father died when I was 7, leaving my mother to carry the weight of everything alone. She worked nonstop bookkeeping during the day, waitressing at night, yet still kept the house in order. She never openly complained, but I could see the exhaustion in her face. Watching her endure life's struggles with quiet strength shaped me. Maybe that's why I admired self-sufficient, resilient people, qualities I thought I saw in Laura when we first met. My teenage years were uneventful. I stayed out of trouble, got good grades, and focused on school. College, however, was a turning point. I immersed myself in my studies, majoring in law while working part-time to pay tuition. It was exhausting, but I thrived under pressure. Then, in my 3rd year, I met Laura. She was bold, confident, and knew how to command attention. At the time, I mistook her bluntness for honesty, her charm for sincerity. We hit it off fast, and by the time I graduated, we were inseparable. Marriage felt like the natural next step, and I convinced myself we were building something real. At first, everything seemed perfect. Laura's energy balanced out my steady resolve. We traveled, explored new hobbies, and even considered starting a family. But as my career took off, cracks in our relationship formed. Laura enjoyed the benefits of my hard work, the nice dinners, financial security, spontaneous trips, but she never stopped complaining about my long hours. No matter how much time I carved out for us, it was never enough. I convinced myself that if I just worked harder, got that promotion, and gave her the stability she claimed to want, everything would fall into place. I was wrong. About 2 years ago, she started pulling away. At first, it was subtle, missed dinners, flimsy excuses, a growing preference for her friends over me. I brushed it off as normal, but deep down, I knew something was off. Whenever I tried to talk about it, she dismissed my concerns, rolling her eyes and insisting I was imagining things. I wanted to believe her, so I buried my doubts and focused on work. Then she stopped joining me for our Saturday golf outings. It was something we'd always done together, or so I thought. Suddenly, she always had better plans. She never gave real reasons, just vague excuses, leaving me to play alone. I convinced myself it was temporary, that she'd come around. Looking back, I was in full-blown denial. The signs were all there. I just refused to see them. By the time that one particular Saturday arrived, my optimism had run dry. The storm outside mirrored my marriage, relentless, unpredictable, impossible to ignore. Still, I had no idea how much worse things were about to get. My mother used to love an old country song called "I've Always Loved the Rain." She'd hum it around the house, and even now, the melody sneaks into my thoughts. Funny enough, I've always hated rain. It ruins plans, makes traffic unbearable, turns simple tasks into a hassle. And on that Saturday, it became the setting for a betrayal I wish I could erase. That morning, I had planned to play golf, but the weather had other plans. The storm rolled in fast, bringing heavy rain and distant thunder. I wasn't a professional golfer, but the sport was my escape, a way to breathe, clear my mind, and unwind. Laura used to come with me, but in the past year, she'd made it clear she had more thrilling ways to spend her weekends. With the rain coming down harder, I decided to cut my game short and head home. I wasn't expecting anything unusual. I wasn't prepared for what I was about to walk into. The second I stepped inside, every illusion I had about Laura shattered. There she was, tangled up on the couch with her boss, Nathan, half-dressed and completely unbothered. If I had brought my golf clubs inside, this story might have ended very differently. Nathan leapt up like a guilty child caught sneaking out, scrambling to dress, while Laura, true to form, didn't even flinch. Instead, she folded her arms and sneered, "Well, aren't you going to say something?" I kept my response short. "Yeah, get out." I stepped aside, leaving the front door open. Nathan bolted, probably grateful to still be in one piece. But Laura? She just stood there, like she had a right to be offended. "You too," I said, voice flat. "I'll pack your things and leave them in the garage. You can pick them up later." Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't buying the act. "Can we talk about this?" she pleaded. "I made a mistake. I don't have anywhere to go." I almost laughed. "Go with him," I said, reaching for my phone. "Because I'm calling his wife." For the first time, Laura looked genuinely panicked. She hesitated, probably realizing just how little control she had left, before grabbing her bag and walking out into the rain. Once she was gone, I sat down, trying to process what had just happened. But the shock didn't last long. I had a call to make. When Sophie, Nathan's wife, answered, she wasn't surprised. I had a feeling she admitted bitterly. I found your number on his phone bill, but he swore it was work-related. Our conversation was cut short when Nathan walked in, but she called me back later. We were both furious. To hell with them, I said. They deserve each other. She let out a bitter laugh. Let's meet up tomorrow. We can compare notes. I'm calling a lawyer first thing Monday morning. The next day, we met at a cafe. Sophie was visibly pregnant, which only made my anger burn hotter. Divorce attorneys can push for the guilty party to cover legal fees, I said, sliding her a list of ruthless lawyers. She managed a small, tired smile. And for the record, I seriously considered using my golf clubs on them. I smirked. That might solve one problem, but it'd create a bigger one. We spent the next hour strategizing, piecing together everything we knew. I mentioned that I had found emails between Laura and Nathan, but I hadn't been able to bring myself to read them yet. Deep down, I already knew the truth. And soon, Laura and Nathan were about to learn a hard lesson. You don't get to destroy someone's life and walk away unscathed. Sophie had a solid plan. She'd come with me when Laura picked up her things, and I'd do the same for her when Nathan was home. Before we parted, I offered some advice. Go to the bank. Leave a little in checking and move the rest. She smirked. Already done. Online banking. I laughed. Smart. I don't even know if we have online banking set up. Laura handled all that. Sophie raised an eyebrow. Let's grab lunch. Afterward, I'll help you figure out your computer. Grateful, I agreed. Over burgers and fries, I hesitantly suggested. Maybe leave a little in your account. If you drain it, it could look bad in court. Her face darkened. I don't have the luxury of playing nice. I'm pregnant, and my husband was off screwing your wife. I chuckled. Fair point. Tell you what, help me with my computer today, and I'll help paint the nursery tomorrow. She grinned. Deal. But let's eat first. You don't want to deal with me hungry. After lunch, where Sophie ate more than I thought humanly possible, we headed to my place. Within minutes, she found my financial software and moved some money. Then she gasped. What? I asked, leaning over. She pointed at the screen, face twisted in disgust. They filmed themselves. My stomach turned. Dozens of videos. Sophie, ever practical, started burning them to a disk. My phone buzzed. Laura. I handed it to Sophie. Want to take this one? With pleasure. She answered, voice cold. You're a real piece of work. I'm about to have a baby, and you're sleeping with my husband. Don't worry, we're packing Nathan's things now. Next stop, your place. I stifled a laugh as Laura scrambled for control. Sophie covered the receiver. She wants her work files from your computer. I smirked. Tell her she can have the whole thing. I'll leave it on the porch Wednesday. Sophie relayed the message, then added, oh, and Mark says Nathan should expect to hear from some of his old clients soon. She hung up, shaking her head. I hope those two stay together. They deserve each other. While she copied files, I reset my alarm code in case Laura got any ideas. Later, we stopped by Staples for new computers and an external hard drive. Sophie downloaded everything from my system before I dropped her off around 10 p.m. As the rain drizzled outside, she turned to me. We need to stay alert. I frowned. Why? They're liars. I wouldn't put it past them to twist this on us. The thought sank in. Great. So now we're the bad guys. She laughed. A lawyer with a sense of humor. Who knew? I smirked. I'll be here tomorrow for the nursery. If you need me at the hospital, just say the word. Her eyes softened. Thanks. Let's just survive tomorrow first. I walked her to her door, checked the locks, and ensured nothing seemed off. Everything was secure, and she'd already updated her alarm code. As I turned to leave, I said, I'm going to the bank and the courthouse tomorrow. Want to file the paperwork together? She shook her head. I still need a lawyer. But I'll make sure Nathan can't touch our accounts. I can't represent you, I said, but I can help you get started. She nodded, so I handed her some forms. Look these over. I'm claiming 2/3 since I'm the primary earner. I don't know your finances, but I doubt Nathan's school counselor salary paid for your house. Sophie smirked. Nope. I'm the breadwinner. I make 10 times what he does. I laughed. Guess that explains why he ran off with my wife. Revisiting his humble roots. She chuckled. Judging by those videos, they revisited plenty. Maybe we should bring a copy to the next school board meeting. We didn't. But on Monday, I did visit Detective Lieutenant Logan Archer, an old adversary. He barely glanced up when I walked in. What do you want now? He barked. I've paid my alimony. This isn't about that, I said. I need to submit evidence. Civil case, not criminal. He eyed me warily as I handed him a CD. He sealed it in an evidence bag. How long do I hold this? Just a couple of days, I replied. I trust you'll keep it safe. Archer didn't like me, and I understood why. Years ago, I represented his ex-wife in a brutal divorce case, only to later learn she'd lied and damaged his reputation. Though I tried to make amends, the damage was done. But I still trusted him to handle this properly. Shaking off the memory, I met Sophie at the bank. Together, we opened new accounts and left just enough in the joint ones to avoid legal scrutiny. The manager mentioned someone had already tried withdrawing funds but stormed out when they found the accounts nearly empty. They should have been quicker, Sophie said dryly. Nathan had no trouble rushing to your house. An hour later, we filed for divorce at the courthouse. The $170 fee was worth every penny, and we arranged for a constable to serve the papers on Tuesday, the last day of school. It felt poetic. After filing for divorce, Sophie and I treated ourselves to lunch and a trip to Lowe's to pick out paint for the baby's room. The outing took longer than expected since Sophie, easily fatigued, needed frequent breaks. Voicemails from Laura and Nathan kept piling up, but neither of us had the slightest interest in their excuses. I didn't need to hear Laura's attempts at damage control, and Sophie had no patience for Nathan's justifications. On Monday and Tuesday, I painted the nursery a soft beige with pale green trim. When I joked that the green matched baby poop, Sophie rolled her eyes. You really know how to ruin a perfectly nice color. By Wednesday morning, I remembered my promise to return Laura's computer. As I opened the door to leave it on the porch, I nearly walked right into her. It's not even 7 a.m., I said, blocking the doorway. You had me served at school, she snapped, voice dripping with accusation. I didn't have your address. That was the most efficient option. Her posture stiffened. I spoke to a lawyer. We didn't commit infidelity. That was our first time kissing, touching, but nothing more. I stared at her. So you never slept with Nathan? Never. I nodded. I'll keep that in mind. Her expression softened. I want to come home. For a brief second, hope flickered in her eyes. I let it sit there just long enough before I crushed it. I think that's a great idea, I said. You can have the house. I'll move out and take what I want. If there's anything missing, let me know. You can move in Sunday at noon. She looked crushed. I don't mean the house, she whispered. I mean us. There is no us. My voice was firm. The house is paid through September. I'll give you $1,000 a month in alimony for 2 years, 1 month for every month we were married. That's my final offer. Her expression hardened. If you won't reconcile, I'll see you in court. I'll take half. Later that day, I stopped by Sophie's house. She met me at the door, seething. You just missed Nathan, she said, eyes blazing. He's demanding half of everything. I almost told him about the videos. Don't waste the surprise, I said. Let him lie under oath. We'll dismantle him. Still, I hope they take our offers. By Tuesday night, we finalized our settlement proposals. Sophie wanted to leave Nathan with nothing, but I reminded her courts don't usually let one party walk away empty-handed. Besides, Laura's sudden interest in reconciliation had nothing to do with love. It was purely about money. I need to start apartment hunting, I said after finishing the nursery. Can you check the classifieds? Already on it. Sophie held up a newspaper. There's a complex 5 minutes away with vacancies and a pool. That'll work. Once I'm back at work, my schedule will be brutal. Sophie smirked. Probably why Laura ran off with Nathan. Though I bet she liked the money. She paused. You should slow down too. Money isn't everything. It was past midnight on Friday when Sophie called. I'm in labor. I made it to her house in under 10 minutes. Despite weeks of preparation, everything felt chaotic. In the whirlwind 13 days since we met, I had painted the nursery, built furniture, bought a video camera and digital recorder, moved, returned to work, and dealt with lawyers. Somehow, everything was finally falling into place. At the hospital, Sophie insisted I stay in the delivery room. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I couldn't refuse. My plan was to hang around until things got serious, then slip out quietly. But with the rain pouring down outside, I should have known nothing would go as planned. I stood by her side, my back turned to the chaos, gripping her hand and speaking softly to keep her calm. When the doctor asked if I wanted to cut the umbilical cord, I declined. But when they handed me the tiny, messy newborn, Lily Bennett, I couldn't help but smile. She was perfect. Following Sophie's suggestion, I scaled back my work hours, much to the dismay of my firm's partners. My new routine wasn't exactly relaxing, but it was fulfilling. Most of my time was spent caring for Lily while Sophie worked from her home office. Every few hours, she'd emerge to nurse, and I'd give them space. I'd always wanted kids, but Laura had constantly pushed the idea down the road, saying we should wait a few more years. Meanwhile, Sophie revealed that Nathan never wanted children and had been indifferent, even annoyed, when she told him she was pregnant. For me, stepping into the role of Uncle Mark for Lily felt effortless. Laura and Nathan, however, weren't done causing problems. Their lawyer filed a counterclaim, accusing Sophie and me of having an affair. The claim was laughable, but the court allowed it as part of the process. Nathan made weak attempts to see Lily, but despite having full custody, Sophie never outright blocked him. He never bothered getting official visitation rights, instead calling randomly to request visits. Sophie always insisted I be there when he came over. Laura, on the other hand, called me twice a week. Sometimes she begged for money. Other times, she needed help with small things, setting up her furnace, installing storm windows. It was as if she had forgotten how to function without me. When depositions began, I had to fight not to laugh. Laura's lawyer looked barely out of college, overconfident but hopelessly unprepared. "You haven't presented any evidence to substantiate claims of infidelity," he stated smugly, as if he had the upper hand. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my expression neutral. She was with another man. The young lawyer's confidence cracked. His face flushed red. This was going to be fun. "That's not accurate," the young lawyer stammered, flipping through his notes. "Legally speaking, infidelity requires..." Before I could respond, my attorney placed a steadying hand on my arm. "Allow me to clarify," she said, her tone sharp and professional. "Mr. Caldwell has handled more divorce cases than I can count. He knows exactly what constitutes infidelity. He doesn't need a lecture." The young attorney fumbled, clearly outmatched. "I'll have to bring my case files to our next meeting," I joked, winking at him. My attorney smirked. "Save it for the courtroom," she quipped, nudging me playfully. I turned to Laura, keeping my voice calm. "I've been more than fair with my offer. You're not getting a no-fault divorce, and you know it. My initial offer was generous, $24,000 in alimony in the house. But since our separation, I've been keeping track of every lie you've told me. For each one, I've reduced the offer by $10. What's left now is $480 a month and the house. Take this to court, and you risk losing the house, too." Laura's jaw clenched. "I haven't lied to you. I never slept with Nathan before we separated." I pulled out my notebook and marked another deduction. $70 per month, I said. "Keep going, and you'll owe me." Her face twisted with rage. "Go to hell," she spat. "We'll settle this in court." Her lawyer decided to try a different approach. "Did you have a romantic or sexual relationship with Sophie Bennett prior to June 3rd? I was ready for this. "Absolutely not," I said without hesitation. "I met Sophie on June 4th. She was 9 months pregnant at the time. She's since had her baby, but there has never been anything romantic between us." The lawyer smirked, as if he had me cornered. "We have photographs of you leaving her house and her leaving your apartment. Are you sure her baby isn't yours?" Before my attorney could intervene, I leaned forward, my voice low and deliberate. "Let me make something crystal clear," I said, locking eyes with him. "If I see one camera pointed at me or Sophie, you'll regret it. And Laura, before you reject my offer, maybe you should ask Nathan what Sophie does for a living. You have until 5 p.m. Monday to take the deal." By Monday, I hadn't heard from Laura. Instead, I received a summons from Judge Evelyn Monroe. Apparently, Laura's lawyer had filed a grievance about my conduct during the deposition. Sophie wasn't thrilled when Nathan sent her a similar demand, accusing her of financial misconduct. In the judge's chambers, Laura's lawyer launched into a dramatic retelling of my supposed offenses. "Your Honor, Mr. Caldwell threatened an officer of the court," he declared. My attorney remained composed. Mr. Caldwell was speaking as a plaintiff, not an attorney. If Mr. Reynolds continues to handle cases with such immaturity, I suspect he won't be the last person to lose patience with him. Judge Monroe turned to me. "What exactly did you say, Mr. Caldwell?" I met her gaze evenly. I called him a twit and told him he didn't want me as an enemy. The judge burst into laughter. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, shaking her head, "being called a twit isn't grounds for disciplinary action. And based on what I've seen so far, I'd say Mr. Caldwell, assessment was spot on. You don't want him as your enemy." Reynolds's confidence wavered, his face turning bright red before muttering something about favoritism and storming out. Judge Monroe's expression sharpened, but before she could speak, I decided to push my luck. Here's some advice you didn't ask for, I said coolly. If you want to talk like that to your friends or clients, knock yourself out. But if you bring that attitude into a judge's chambers again, you'd better have an overnight bag ready. Reynolds blinked, confused. Judge Monroe didn't let the silence linger. Contempt of court, she said flatly. It means I can toss you in jail for as long as I see fit. Reynolds swallowed hard. Mr. Caldwell is absolutely correct, she continued. Next time you speak in my chambers, start with Your Honor or Ma'am and check your tone. If you want to play in this league, grow up. We don't have time for tantrums. As for your request, it's denied. File a formal motion if you like, but I'll reject that too. Now get out. Laura sat stiffly, her face growing paler with every word. She didn't look at me once as we left the room. I didn't miss my chance to get in one last dig. As for your counteroffer, I said, walking beside her, don't hold your breath. The following months blurred together. 3 or 4 evenings a week, I found myself at Sophie's, getting hands-on experience with bottles and diapers. Sophie gradually stepped back from her business and gave me crash courses in caring for Lily. It was a win-win. She got some much-needed rest, and I got time with Lily. Even when the baby was cranky, a short walk around the house and a silly song settled her. I wasn't entirely sure what to make of my relationship with Sophie. I knew what I wanted it to be, but she seemed to see me more as a brother. For the most part, I treated her in kind. Still, we spent our evenings together once Lily was asleep, watching movies, talking, and sharing meals. One night, as we sat on the couch, a random storm rolled in, rain tapping against the windows. You okay? I asked. She shrugged. Yeah, just thinking. About. She sighed. I spent years with Nathan thinking I had stability, only to realize he was just waiting for the first opportunity to run. I don't want to make that mistake again. I nodded, understanding what she meant. You won't. It was the closest we ever came to acknowledging the growing tension between us. By January, both divorce cases, Caldwell versus Caldwell and Bennett versus Bennett, finally landed on the family court docket. Laura made one last attempt to negotiate, but after she pulled the stunt with the private investigator, I refused to entertain it. Nathan, meanwhile, had all but disappeared, clearly more concerned about a potential child support case than visiting Lily. Sophie wasn't pushing it, yet. We had the same judge for both our cases, and since mine was scheduled first, hers would likely become redundant. The weather that morning was clear, as if the universe itself had decided to be on our side. Sophie and I walked into the courthouse together, both confident, both ready. Laura's counterclaim was tossed almost immediately. It was baseless, and the court saw right through it. She tried presenting photos of me leaving Sophie's house and vice versa, but there was nothing remotely incriminating in them. Our case was straightforward. Laura had testified in her deposition that she and Nathan weren't involved before June 3rd. We had stronger evidence, emails, videos, but we had saved them as a last resort. It didn't take long before we had to play that card. When I testified, I kept things vague, hinting at evidence proving Laura and Nathan's relationship began much earlier. Oddly, her attorney didn't challenge me on it. When Laura took the stand, she denied the affair outright, on both direct questioning and cross-examination. That was their mistake. My attorney stood. Your Honor, we have a rebuttal witness. The plaintiff calls Detective Lieutenant Logan Archer. Laura's lawyer stiffened. He hadn't been given advance notice. Since Archer was a rebuttal witness, we weren't required to disclose him beforehand. There was no time to prepare a defense. Archer took the stand, shot me a withering glare, then placed his hand on the Bible for the oath. My attorney began, Detective Archer, what is your relationship with the plaintiff? Archer's lip curled. None. Actually, I can't stand him. A ripple of amusement went through the room. Do you have any professional ties to him? Not a chance, Archer said flatly. He's a sleazy divorce lawyer. I work criminal cases. Laura's attorney shot to his feet. Objection. Relevance. The judge raised an eyebrow. My attorney remained calm. Your Honor, this witness holds key information related to Miss Grayson's testimony. I'm establishing his impartiality and setting the timeline for the court. Before the judge could rule, Archer leaned forward. Oh, I'm plenty impartial, he said darkly. Frankly, I hope she takes him for everything he's got, just like his client did to me. The judge silenced my attorney with a sharp warning, then gestured for the questioning to continue. When was the last time you saw Mr. Caldwell? Archer flipped through a small notebook. June 5th. And did he leave anything with you on that day? Yes. What was it? A compact disc, Archer said, voice neutral. Do you know what's on the disc? No. Archer replied firmly. He asked me to hold on to it, had me sign a chain of custody form, and sealed it in an evidence bag. I never looked at it. Has the disc left your custody since then? No, Archer said without hesitation. It's been in my office safe, which only I can access. Do you have the disc with you today? Archer nodded, producing the sealed evidence bag along with the chain of custody form. This is it. My attorney turned to the judge. We offer plaintiffs exhibits 1 and 2 into evidence as a rebuttal to Ms. Grayson's testimony. Laura's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled it. I glanced at Laura. Her face had gone ashen, and she was whispering frantically to her attorney, who looked just as panicked. Your Honor, my attorney continued, the contents of this disc are not suitable for public display. We request an in-camera review. The judge nodded. Recess until 11:30 a.m. As I stepped into the hallway, I spotted Sophie pacing with Lily nestled in her sling. I gave her a thumbs up as I approached. Well, looks like this afternoon will be anticlimactic. I grinned. Though I'm sorry you won't get to see Nathan's face when he realizes it's over. Sophie smirked, passing Lily to me. Oh, don't worry. Watching him grovel will be just as satisfying. As we chatted, Laura and her attorney emerged from the courtroom, followed closely by Nathan and his lawyer. Laura didn't waste time. I'll take the original deal, she said quickly. I still think you're bluffing, but Nathan claims Sophie might have cooked something up on the computer. Sophie bristled. Cooked up, she snapped. More like served up. Your lies, your videos, and your emails. That's why we made sure a police officer handled it. You're done, and you know it. Mark knows it, I know it, and now the judge knows it. I placed a hand on Sophie's arm to calm her, but she wasn't done. Turning to me, she said sharply, Don't even try to stop me. They wanted to play dirty, lying, cheating, and trying to take more than they deserved. Welcome to the big leagues, sweetie. Then she turned her fire on Nathan. You'll get half of whatever the judge gives her. The house. And if you don't like it, we can run this circus again this afternoon. I'm sure the transcripts will paint a flattering picture of you abandoning your pregnant wife to fool around. You should be grateful Mark stepped up to help with Lily, otherwise, you'd be looking at $500 a month in child support. Nathan stood speechless, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Even I was momentarily stunned. Sophie was livid, and I wasn't about to cross her. Nathan's lawyer, sensing how dire their situation was, quickly jumped in. I think we should discuss this in private. Sophie crossed her arms. Take all the time you need. Just don't forget we have a judge waiting. Laura glared at Nathan. You idiot, she hissed. I smirked. This is what happens when you bet against the house. Nathan's lawyer hesitated before speaking. Half of what she gets, minus the house, he said cautiously. Sophie folded her arms, her smirk widening. Oh, and Nathan gets to cover my legal fees, she added smoothly. It's an at-fault divorce, that's on him. His lawyer exhaled sharply but gave a reluctant nod. Sophie turned to me, her grin softening. Should I assume you're sending me an invoice for all this legal advice, counselor? I hear you charge $600 an hour. My attorney swears your time is just as valuable as hers. I chuckled. I'll send you the bill next Christmas. Nathan, meanwhile, seemed to be running numbers in his head, his expression darkening as the reality of his financial situation sank in. Sophie, sensing the moment, gave my arm a light squeeze and pulled me away from the group. I know I spoke for you back there, and I shouldn't have, she admitted, her voice quieter now. I realize you don't want her walking away with nothing, but I think this is what they deserve. She exhaled slowly. Still, I overstepped. I shook my head. Don't lose sleep over it. You're right. And I'm wrong. You might want to write that down because you probably won't hear it again. She grinned. Oh, I wouldn't bet on that. You said the same thing when I told you the nursery colors would look perfect together. I was about to respond when my attorney walked up with an update. She's ready to settle, she said, clearly satisfied. She'll take $500 in alimony for 2 years, the house, and a quarter of the joint checking account. With Lily strapped to my chest, I shrugged. They still don't get it. In an at-fault divorce, she's entitled to at most a third of the assets. Technically, I could force the sale of the house and walk away with 2/3 of the proceeds. If she pushes this, she'll end up paying my legal fees, too. Forget alimony. We'll wait for the judge. Laura's lawyer walked away, looking utterly defeated. Laura, on the other hand, looked ready to burst into tears. When Judge Monroe returned, her ruling hit harder than I had anticipated. Ms. Grayson, she began, her voice cool and firm, I have reviewed the evidence, and I find your conduct in this case deeply troubling. You deliberately misled this court in an attempt to secure financial gain. That is not something I take lightly. She let the words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. Mr. Caldwell made multiple reasonable settlement offers, all of which you rejected. You chose to gamble, and you lost. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. The division of marital assets will be as follows: 94% to Mr. Caldwell, 6% to Ms. Grayson. Since Mr. Caldwell was the primary earner, some alimony is warranted. I order him to pay $5 per month for the next 2 months. It is also my understanding that Mr. Caldwell has already paid $1,000 a month for the past 7 months. That amount is to be returned to him, minus $10 for administrative deductions. She shifted her gaze to me. Additionally, neither party may alter existing insurance policies where the other remains a primary beneficiary. Turning back to Laura, her voice took on a sterner edge. You may reside in the marital home for 5 years. However, all associated costs will be your responsibility. After 5 years, the house will be sold, with 75% of the proceeds going to Mr. Caldwell and 25% to you. An official appraisal must be completed within 30 days, at your expense. If the home is sold below appraised value, the loss will be deducted from your share of the proceeds. She took a final glance at the paperwork before delivering the final blow. Lastly, Ms. Grayson is responsible for all reasonable legal fees incurred by Mr. Caldwell. An itemized bill will be provided within 60 days. With a sharp bang of the gavel, she concluded, "Court is adjourned." As I turned, I spotted Sophie in the back row, cradling Lily while grinning ear to ear. She tilted her chin toward Laura, who sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. Behind her, Nathan was slumped over, rubbing his temples as if trying to keep his head from exploding. I couldn't resist. "That's one hell of an expensive affair," I said, loud enough for both of them to hear. That evening, Sophie and I took our attorneys out for dinner. They joked that after securing these settlements, we should be buying them something nicer than dinner. It was a well-earned celebration. Halfway through the meal, Sophie surprised the table. "Let them sweat for a few days," she said, twirling her wine glass. "Then reach out to Nathan's lawyer. Offer him a deal." I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of deal?" "I'll waive the money he owes me, and I won't pursue child support on one condition." I already knew the answer, but let her say it. "He stays out of our lives." Completely. I leaned back in my chair. "What happened to wanting to crush him?" I teased. She smirked. "Mission accomplished. But you're the one who told me, if you take everything from someone, they have nothing left to lose." I tilted my head, amused. "So now you're quoting me?" I said, bouncing Lily gently on my knee. She shot me a playful look. "Don't get used to it. You're free to give advice whenever you want, but I'm free to ignore it." Nodding, I decided to match her move. "Do the same with Laura," I said. "Let her know I'm willing to walk away from the money tied up in the house." Sophie gave me a thoughtful look. "You were right about one thing," she admitted. "We earned a lot of goodwill by being reasonable when we had them cornered. We could have destroyed them, but instead, we let them keep a shred of dignity." I smirked. "And don't expect me to admit you're right anytime soon." The following months brought a sense of normalcy. Sophie slowly regained her confidence. The stress of a messy divorce and raising a baby alone had weighed on her, but with time, she found her footing again. The holiday season had been tough for both of us, and as the final court dates loomed, Sophie's patience wore thin. Seeing her smile again felt like a win. I had expected my time with Sophie to naturally decrease now that the storm had passed, and I wasn't wrong. After the divorce was finalized, I still babysat Lily a few nights a week while Sophie worked or hit the gym, but my evenings gradually shifted back to the office. With just a few months left on my firm contract, I was gearing up to branch out on my own. By summer, I planned to be running my own practice. The idea was both exciting and daunting, but I was ready. Just a few days after the court ruling, Detective Logan Archer showed up at my office unannounced. No knock. No greeting. Just straight to business. "She lied," he said, voice clipped. I didn't need to ask who he meant. "I know," I replied evenly. His expression darkened. "You didn't know when you took her case," he accused. I sighed. "Not at first. I didn't figure it out until last year. She really had me convinced." For the first time, Archer let out a bitter chuckle. "She's good at that," he muttered. "So what tipped you off?" I leaned back in my chair. "You know she remarried, right?" His jaw clenched. "Yeah, some rich old guy." I nodded. "Pulled the same con on him." I did some digging. Turns out the guy was pushing 70. No way in hell he did what she claimed. Archer let out a sharp breath. "And yet, that didn't stop you from going after me," he said. eyes narrowing. I gave a small nod, acknowledging his frustration. Your service record was the issue, I explained. The complaints of excessive force were what swayed the judge. His expression hardened, but he didn't argue. I exhaled. You know, looking back, I've realized most good cops have complaints like that on their record. When I found out about her new husband, I played it differently. Told her I'd take the case, but only if she paid up front. Archer raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. She suddenly didn't have the cash. I smirked. Bingo. Instead, she made alternative offers. Archer let out a dark laugh. Should have taken her up on it, then dropped the case anyway. Not my style, I said. Instead, I called my paralegal into the room under the pretense of needing paperwork. Let's just say she didn't seem to realize offering sex for legal services was a felony. Archer shook his head, letting out another dry chuckle. Unbelievable. You know she's got an online subscription site now? I blinked. Excuse me. $12 a month gets you full access, he said, his voice dripping with amusement. I let out a bark of laughter. That's nothing. One peek at that disc I gave you, and you'd have had front row seats to my ex-wife's greatest hits. Archer's eyebrows shot up. So that's what was on the disc, he muttered. Damn. If I'd known, we could have turned it into a joint business venture. I shook my head, still smirking. Then his tone shifted. Why'd you trust me with it? He asked suddenly. Why not just toss it? Because of your reputation, I said simply. Even when I was trying to prove you were the biggest idiot alive, everyone told me you were a by-the-book cop. He seemed taken aback for a second, but not displeased. I sent a letter, by the way, I added casually. Archer's brow furrowed. What letter? To your captain and the commissioner, I said. His eyes narrowed. When? Last February or March, I said. Didn't they tell you? He shook his head. No, but I got promoted to lieutenant in April. Didn't even have to take the exam. He leaned back, crossing his arms. Figured that was never going to happen. I hesitated, then said, Look, I am sorry. I really believed her. I mean, hell, I missed my own wife's affair for almost a year. Archer smirked. One thing's for sure, if I ever get divorced again, I'm hiring you. By late March, Sophie called my office out of the blue. It was 8 p.m. Why the hell are you still at work? She demanded. Didn't we talk about this? Thinking she was joking, I made a snarky comment. I was wrong. You haven't been to dinner in a week, she snapped. When you watch Lily, you leave the second I get home. Did you learn nothing from your failed marriage? That one stung. Caught off guard, I fumbled for an apology. I'm just trying to wrap things up. My contract's almost over, and I have 7 weeks of vacation banked. I'm taking it all before June. Good, she said flatly. I'm claiming one of those weeks. I tried to lighten the mood. What are we painting this time? Nothing, she said, voice cold. But if you don't want to spend time with us, just say so. Then she hung up. 2 nights later, I showed up at her place feeling awkward as hell. I was supposed to watch Lily while she hit the Y for a workout. Truthfully, I was the one who needed the gym. Since I'd stopped regular dinners with Sophie and Lily, my diet had devolved into a steady rotation of takeout. Sophie, meanwhile, looked like she hadn't been pregnant a day in her life. She opened the door, arms crossed. I wasn't sure you'd show, so I made other plans. That hit harder than I expected. When have I ever bailed? I asked, louder than I meant. When have I ever let you down when it comes to Lily? Her posture softened immediately. That's not what I meant, she said. I was out of line the other night. I shouldn't have hung up on you. I shrugged. I made a dumb joke, and it backfired. Let's call it even. A faint smile tugged at her lips. Well, good news. Lily has a play date tonight. If it goes well, I'll start hosting the other little girl on Thursdays. Which means you're coming with me to the gym instead. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, no. This physique is a masterpiece in progress. Greasy cheeseburgers, fries, burritos, all part of the plan. Sophie smirked. Don't worry. I'll drive. Over the next few weeks, our routine shifted back to something more familiar. We started having dinner together again at least 5 nights a week, alternating between her place and mine. Neither of us talked about why things had changed. We just let it happen. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just showing up for Lily. I was showing up for Sophie, too. I watched Lily a couple of times a week so Sophie could get a break. Whether she was hitting the gym, catching up with friends, or just enjoying a quiet evening alone, I made sure she had the space to recharge. After workouts, we often ran errands together, restocking our kitchens. Sophie, of course, took it upon herself to make sure my pantry held more than just frozen waffles and coffee. During my time off, We spend entire days together, juggling work, play, and Lily's ever-growing list of discoveries. As Lily's first birthday approached, so did the anniversary of one of the hardest days in both our lives. I thought Sophie would be moody, maybe even angry, since I certainly felt the weight of it. But if she was, she didn't let it show. "My life's better now," she said quietly one night, as we shared a bottle of wine on June 3rd. I glanced at her. "You don't miss him?" She shook her head without hesitation. "Not even a little." I let that sink in before nodding. "I don't miss Laura either," I admitted. "I miss parts of it, but not her." Sophie reached across the couch and squeezed my hand. "We're better off without them." I didn't argue. Launching my own firm was equal parts terrifying and exhilarating. What surprised me most, though, was how much Sophie was a part of it. The day I officially opened my doors, she and Lily were waiting outside my office. I hadn't seen them for a few days. They'd been out of town visiting family, and I was completely unprepared for what they had planned. Unlocking the door, I stepped inside and froze. The furniture I had painstakingly picked out cheap, functional, boring was gone. Instead, the space was fully furnished with sleek, professional pieces I had never seen before. The paralegal's desk looked modern and polished, far better than the standard office furniture I'd originally ordered. My own desk, formerly a budget IKEA piece, had been replaced with a solid walnut masterpiece, paired with actual leather chairs. Sophie stood behind me, grinning. Surprise. I turned, stunned. "What did you do?" "This is a gift," she said, nudging Lily forward. "From Lily and me. Because we saw the furniture you picked, and I just couldn't let that happen." I instinctively put an arm around her shoulder. "Sophie, this is incredible. But you really didn't have to spend so much." She waved a hand dismissively. "It's just money. We'll both make more." Then, as if it was the most casual thing in the world, she added, "Besides, I'm here to be your first official client." I raised an eyebrow. "Seriously?" She nodded. "I need a will and guardianship papers for Lily. If anything happens to me, I'll go after Nathan for child support, but I'll drop it if he signs away his rights." I exhaled. "I can do that. But, you didn't have to bribe me with furniture." She smirked. "It wasn't a bribe. It was a preventative measure." I narrowed my eyes. "How do you even pull this off?" "Joan, my paralegal," Sophie explained. "I upgraded your IKEA order and got Joan's key. Dodging you was the hardest part, but totally worth it." I glanced at Lily, who was busy babbling to herself. "She's picking up words fast," I said. Sophie grinned mischievously. "Yeah, which is why we should be careful. I vote that you're scumsucker and I'm witch. That way, she'll be fully prepared for her teenage years." I shook my head. "Let's talk about the will." She sat across from me, suddenly serious. "It's simple. Everything goes into a trust for Lily. And the guardian? You." I blinked. "Are you sure?" She gave me a look that made the question seem ridiculous. "Who else?" I smiled, but something twisted in my chest. I technically can't take you as a client," I reminded her. "Good," she said. "Because I was going to fire you before I had to pay." A week later, we were grocery shopping together when Sophie gave me a curious look. I was tapping a cantaloupe, pretending I knew what I was doing. "You've been quiet," she said. "What's on your mind?" The moment in my office had stuck with me. I didn't just want Sophie and Lily in my life. I wanted them at the center of it. But the fear of ruining what we had kept me from saying it out loud. "Spit it out," she prodded, nudging me. Taking a breath, I finally asked, "Would it be weird if I asked you out?" Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "We'll talk after we're done here," she said smoothly. The rest of the shopping trip was quieter, and I immediately regretted bringing it up. By the time we reached the car, I had braced myself for rejection. We loaded the groceries into the trunk, the silence stretching between us. Then, out of nowhere, Sophie broke it. "Were you serious about asking me out?" she asked, still not looking at me. I hesitated. "Yeah." To my surprise, she burst into full-blown laughter. The kind where she had to hold onto the car to catch her breath. I stared at her. I didn't think it was that funny. She waved a hand, still trying to breathe. "It's not the question. It's how serious you looked." I frowned, confused. Finally, she straightened, giving me a thoughtful look. "Okay, let's break this down." I folded my arms. "Oh, great. Now it's a case study." She ignored me. "Do we spend more time together or apart?" I thought about it. "Together." She nodded. "And when we are together, what do we do?" I hesitated. "We talk. We play with Lily. We have dinner, My voice trailed off as realization hit. For months, Sophie said bluntly, I thought we were already dating. I blinked. What? At work, I call you my boyfriend, she admitted. And when you started pulling away after the divorces were finalized. It pissed me off. I was speechless. Then, she smiled. So no, Mark, it wouldn't be weird if you asked me out. But next time? Maybe realize you already have. I thought we were already dating, Sophie said bluntly. At work, I call you my boyfriend. When you started pulling away after the divorces were finalized, I thought you were just waiting to make it official. Then I realized you didn't see me that way. She exhaled sharply. And that pissed me off. I stood there, completely stunned. I went to the gym, got my pre-baby body back, and you didn't even notice, she added. I swallowed. I noticed, I said quietly. She smirked. Oh, I know. There are mirrors at the gym. I saw you sneaking glances. I felt heat creep up my neck. Did you notice my workout clothes getting smaller? She teased. I nodded, speechless. Well, she said, folding her arms. I was dressing for someone's attention. You just didn't realize it was yours. The truth hit me like a lightning bolt. So, I fumbled, feeling like a complete idiot. What now? She leaned in, grinning. Go ahead. I blinked. Go ahead and ask me out, she whispered. I shook my head, hiding a smile. Never mind. I changed my mind. She laughed. Even after Sophie's playful invitation, we didn't rush into anything. We had something good, and neither of us wanted to mess with it. Life with Lily, now a spirited, 15-month-old, kept us too busy for labels. Precocious didn't do her justice. I spent 2 full days child-proofing Sophie's house, only for Lily to undo every one of my efforts in record time. Baby gates? Pointless. Outlet covers? A joke. The second she figured something out, she'd grab one of our hands and proudly show off her new skill. Sophie would laugh, shaking her head, while I tried to figure out if Lily was learning by watching me or if she was just one step ahead of me at all times. One day, she opened a cabinet I had never been able to figure out myself. Sophie didn't let me live that down. Playpens? Forget it. Lily treated them like escape rooms. We lugged a giant play mat back and forth between our houses, hoping it would keep her entertained long enough for us to breathe. She ignored the educational sections but was obsessed with the loudest, most obnoxious features. Whenever she pushed my patience to the absolute brink, she'd melt it all away with a hug or a big, innocent-eyed stare. Staying annoyed was impossible. Sophie had the same power over me. 2 weeks after that conversation in the car, Sophie casually asked me to stay over. Nothing in our routine had changed except now. I saw everything differently. Looking back, I realized she had been right. We had been dating for over a year, and I had been too blind to see it. That night, I saw her more clearly than ever. She came into the bedroom wearing a short, white nightgown, and I forgot how to breathe. For a split second, I caught a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. Was she nervous, or was she waiting for my reaction? Either way, I couldn't look away. Our first kisses were tentative, uncharted territory for both of us. It had been over a year since either of us had been close to someone, and the weight of that moment settled heavily between us. I was careful, unsure at first, but when she pulled me closer, every doubt vanished. Later that night, when she woke me again, I knew for certain. Being with Sophie wasn't like anything I'd known before. She wasn't uncertain or passive. She knew exactly what she wanted, and the way she responded made it clear that we were completely in sync. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. By September, Nathan and Laura had tied the knot again. No shock, we weren't invited. Nathan, in true cowardly form, signed away his parental rights the second Sophie offered to drop child support. He didn't even read the papers, just scribbled his signature and handed them back, eager to cut all ties. Sophie took it in stride, but I was furious. How could anyone walk away from their child so easily? Not that it changed anything. I had already agreed to be Lily's legal guardian if anything ever happened to Sophie. I updated my will to include a trust for her, making it official. The more time passed, the more I realized something. Sophie embodied everything I admired in a partner. I didn't know if time had changed my perspective or if we had been right for each other all along, but I wasn't questioning it anymore. She showed her affection in small, meaningful ways. A touch of her hand as we walked. The brush of her fingers against my arm. Leaning against me as we watched Lily play. And I found plenty of excuses to pull her close, to steal a kiss, to let my hand linger just a little longer than necessary. By the time the holidays rolled around, We knew it was time to have the conversation. Where was this going? Could we trust it after everything we had been through? We had both failed at marriage before. Mine had barely lasted 2 years. Hers less than 18 months. Both had crumbled under infidelity. But this was different. We weren't haunted by the ghosts of Laura or Nathan. We saw each other. One night in December, I voiced what had been nagging at me for weeks. I think I figured out why this feels so different. Sophie looked at me, curious. Yeah? Why's that? I leaned back, thinking. Our lives are like intersecting circles. She raised an eyebrow. That's your big revelation? I chuckled. Hear me out. In past relationships, the circles were concentric. Everything revolved around one person. But with us, our circles overlap, and we still have space for ourselves. Sophie thought about it, then nodded. You're right, she said softly. She stared into the fireplace, lost in thought. Nathan and I didn't have that, she admitted. He wanted everything to be about us, and he couldn't handle me wanting independence. When I started working, it was like I'd betrayed him. I understood completely. Laura didn't have any friends that weren't mine first, I said. She started golfing because I did, not because she liked it. Hell, I didn't even love golf. It just gave me space. Sophie smiled. I like that idea. Intersecting circles. I smiled back, hoping she always would. When we finally exchanged wedding bands, they were crafted with that very idea in mind. 2 distinct rings, woven together, separate, yet perfectly connected. It felt just right.